It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today, of course, smartest guy in the room, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul.
Michael, how are you?
Things are going good.
Did you have a good Christmas, good New Year's?
Yeah. We're excited to get the year kicked off in 2019, trying to continue the success that we've had for the last, 6 or so years.
Talk a little bit about your success, because people that don't know you and maybe have never heard of SPI, tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, so we're, apartment syndicators, kind of first and foremost. What we do is we'll go tie up large-scale multifamily deals and get the debt put on them, get a plan put in place, and go, put some of our money in it, and then raise, the majority of the capital from other people. So kind of put the deals together and then operate them. So that's our primary focus at SPI. And we secondarily we'll do some like advisory services, would basically mean that we'll help if you have a few $1,000,000 and you're trying to buy a larger scale multifamily deal in Texas, particularly Dallas-Fort Worth and Austin are the two markets that we're that we do business in predominantly. We kind of help some people enter into the marketplace that aren't currently here. So kind of the pitch we like to say is kind of your money, our execution type of deal. And that's kind of the value proposition we get out into the marketplace to the brokers. If they don't know who you are, they tend not to take you seriously, or it's just a completely unfair business. So this kind of levels the playing field a little bit for those that are coming in. But to kind of make it worth our time, we need, maybe $3 million or more in equity to kind of make the deal make sense economically for us to take time away from, doing our own deals.
Yeah, that's the best type of leverage, using somebody else's knowledge and resources, and use your money, but use their professionalism and knowledge of the market itself. So Michael and his group do a great job over there. So let's talk a little bit about Ask Mike Monday question. I have acquired a property with 9 units, very close to a tourist area, and would like to Airbnb all or most of them. However, I'm using a hard money loan to acquire and rehab units. How can I show seasoning/stabilization to get a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac conventional loan when Airbnb units are not stable by nature?
I don't know. I don't think you can. There's a reason why you get a hard money loan, and I don't think that's going to work. So I wouldn't do that. If you need to have a takeout with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, plus having 9 units is pretty small, so I don't think it'll size likely to justify putting that type of debt on. So I think that you would be stuck in the bank financing world if you do that type of project.
Yeah, that's just not something that you guys do, right? I mean, you're not into Airbnbs. You're not into
market rate traditional multifamily guys.
Yeah, you guys don't buy properties up in the mountains. You don't buy properties next to the ocean or the lakes. You buy properties next to the Samsung plant or the Apple plant or the whatever the heck, a large employment.
Yeah, and then I don't think Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac aren't in the business of doing hospitality. That's essentially a quasi hotel. So they're here to support, housing. In particular, they have a mission for workforce housing. So I don't think that's a good fit. So like I said, I wouldn't do that deal if you need to have a takeout with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I think that's a bank takeout at the end of the day.
All right, let's go on to question number 2. Okay, from your experience, what are the pros and cons of Section 8 tenants? I was going through a rent roll and half the tenants are subsidized. Does a property need to be qualified to accept Section 8 tenants? Thanks. Love the podcast.
Yeah, I think there's different municipalities have different rules and guidelines, and there's rent control and stuff like that in certain places, and certain places there's not. But so make sure you understand your local rules and things like that. But with that said, I think there's a concept really. There's like 3 types of kind of deals that might take Section 8. You got your like a tax credit deal where the developer built it, and they got all these tax credits, and they have to take only Section 8 tenants or housing voucher tenants. There's something that's called a property that might have what's called LURA, Land Use Restriction Agreement, LURA, LURA, and then they have either all or a percentage of their units have to be made available only to people that have that make either say 50% or 60% or 80% of the AMI area median income. And then, so, that's a certain percentage of it. And then there's your standard market rate deal, which is like what we do, where you don't have any sort of government subsidies. You take whoever you want. But, you're allowed to certainly take housing vouchers if you want to take some certain percentage of your tenants have Section 8s, you can certainly take that. Like we could do that on our properties. We tend not to do that in Texas in our deals because that's just not how we're set up and what we want to do. And that's perfectly fine to do in Texas. And in some states, you have rules where you can't discriminate for a source of income, meaning that you have to take housing vouchers if you're there. Like in our Texas, you literally can just have that as your policy where you don't take housing vouchers. So that's kind of why I'm saying make sure you understand whatever the local, state, and municipalities have different rules. So you just need to make sure you have a competent management company that you understand what you're getting into. Kind of the pros and cons. I mean, the pros are you get a little bit more of a guaranteed sure source of income. I mean, the government tends to pay their bills on time, where your tenants may or may not pay your bills on time. So that's kind of really the primary benefit to it. They tend to be, a little bit stable and I think generally speaking, they don't have too much trouble from the tenant profile because if they act up too much, they can be kicked off the housing voucher program. So, but generally speaking, they have certain maximums that they can pay in rent. So they can only pay up to a certain amount of money. So you kind of restricted in the amount of growth you can push your rental rates if you have a bunch of housing vouchers. So if you're going to be in a better part of town, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to do that. If you're in a high crime, low or socioeconomic part of town, maybe it makes a little bit more sense. Also, the perception is, I don't know how much it's really true, but the perception certainly is you can tend to get maybe a little bit more crime or a little bit more kind of tenant cause issues on your properties if you take a bunch of Section 8 tenants, and that may or may not be true, but that's kind of some of the perception in the marketplace. But those are kind of my general thoughts. Paul, you have anything to add?
Just a couple of things. You're driving down in the middle of a very economically challenged area. What's Michael Becker's rule number one? Yeah,
don't buy in the hood, right?
But you're driving the hood, and then you're going down. You're all of a sudden you see a bunch of these crappy buildings that were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that may have been taken care of, but most of them have not been taken care of. But all of a sudden you see this beautiful multifamily property that was maybe built 2 or 3 years ago. Well, that was a tax credit deal. So those people in that property typically are going to have to show that they're kind of lower income, socioeconomic challenged. And so, but they're living in a nice property. That's a tax credit deal. So you're driving down a kind of a marginal area and you see that's a tax credit deal. That screams that. The other one is LURA, this land use restriction agreement. Find out a little bit more about that. Make sure that you ask that question up front. If the property was in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, that a lot of these LURAs on these properties were done when the savings and loan crisis was back in 87, 88, and 89, and they were on so what happened on those deals was the property went back to the bank, and then the bank was taken in by the RTC, and then the bank went to all these loans that were on the government's payroll, on the government's books, and said, for you to get this property, for the new buyer to get this property at a cheaper price, we're going to put some restrictions in there that we want to promote affordable housing. So maybe 20% or 30% of the building has to have these covenants that say that you have to have tenants that we have to see their income, and you have to fill out paperwork on an annual basis because you got to get their tax returns and their paycheck stubs and their W-2s to prove that they're either 40% or 60% under the area median income. So some of your properties out there are going to have these LURAs that were built, say, 30 plus years ago or 25 years ago, and they may be just coming up for either at the end of them, but they still may be under LURA too. So just know that. And then Fannie likes LURAs. Freddie's not too crazy about LURAs on the small balance side. So make sure you ask the seller property, does this property have a LURA against it if you're looking for agency financing? Because that's we're going to have to go one or two paths on that deal. So just know that. And then just like what Mike was talking about, market rate housing, for Section 8, here in the state of Texas, again, you don't have to take Section 8. It's really a business decision to take it or not. And the Section 8 people are just screaming. They love the 2 and 3 bedroom properties because that's usually family run properties. And then the governmental agency will come out and make sure that property is well taken care of, that it meets all the household needs, and that there's no holes in the wall, and that it's good housing for folks. Again, Section 8, you may have the tenant pay 30%, may pay 50%, may pay nothing. And the taxing authority will pay the difference, and that comes to you typically 30, 40 days after the rent is due. Sometimes it can come the same month. But it's a partnership between the authority and you, and it have you make a decision whether you want to have Section 8 people on your property. What do you think about that, Michael?
Yeah, that's Paul's right, and it's just kind of a business decision. And generally speaking, if they have limits that are set out, and the LURA will have a limit set out on the 1-bedroom in this county can only get a certain amount maximum rent, and the 2-bedroom can get a certain amount of the maximum rent. So, and the same thing with the housing vouchers, they can only have a certain amount the max they'll pay. So you just make sure you understand what those numbers are when you put in. If you have a LURA and you're putting a deal together and you're assuming you get $1,000 rents where the maximum is only $900, and you're going to shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, these LURAs can be a little bit dangerous. That if the seller doesn't know, or the seller has not been putting the paperwork to the state on a timely basis, that could be a problem. And I've seen sometimes the seller doesn't even know that property is a LURA, and we pull it up on the title work and it shows it's on there. That could be a problem for you, especially if you've gone in and put hard money in, and then you're thinking that you're going to be able to raise rents by 10, 20, 30%, 50% if you put rehab dollars into the property itself to kind of fix it up, put new cabinets, countertops on the property. But because it's a LURA property, it's going to be restricted, that you may not be able to go higher than what the area median income is of 60% of what they're saying, what the maximum rent you can charge. So that could be a big problem. So make sure you ask that question of the seller. Ask the person that represents you to ask that question. So some great information. Again, February the 6th at the Grapevine Convention Center. Old Capital Speaker Series featuring 2 economists. One is from CoStar, the other one is from Freddie Mac. We are excited to have these 2 guys to kind of talk a little bit about what's going on in 2019, what we can expect for multifamily, affordable housing. These are the guys they're absolutely in the know. They know exactly what the numbers are. You want to be there. Great networking opportunity. And go to the oldcapitalpodcast.com website and sign up for that. Again, that's a free event. We ask you to come on in, but sign up for it. We'd love to see you out there. Great opportunity to network with other multifamily investors, people that actually are doing it. You want to build a relationship with some of the folks out there. Anything else?
Yeah, then I think this will air right before the January 16th event up in San Jose or San Mateo at the Marriott up there. You can also find more information about that at oldcapitalpodcast.com. And, also we have some other additional resources there, a white paper. We have a few webinars that James Ng put together. So I think it's a bunch of good information if you guys are serious about getting into this business.
Well, we appreciate your time. Thanks, Mr. Michael Becker. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.